at our family's Christmas dinner, right as I reached for the gravy boat, my grandmother's voice cut through the chatter like a knife. "Well," she said loudly, lifting her glass, "at least one of my granddaughters is finally growing up." Every fork paused midair. My parents looked up. My sister Emily straightened in her chair, the diamond on her left hand catching the light from the chandelier. Grandma June turned toward her with a theatrical sigh of satisfaction. "Your sister bought a house," she announced to the whole table. "Can you believe it? A house before 30. Mortgage, husband, proper life. When will you settle down? Nora?" All eyes landed on me. I was 32, in a navy sweater instead of a glittering bracelet, sipping tap water instead of wine because I was driving home later. I rented a modest one-bedroom in the city and had exactly zero interest in rushing into a suburban mortgage or a husband just to prove I was on track. But to my grandmother, the scoreboard was simple. Ring, check. Baby on the way. Soon. House with a yard. Ultimate proof of success. Emily had 2 out of 3, and a just-closed deal on a pastel blue starter home an hour outside Portland. I, in her worldview, had spreadsheets. The cousins snickered. My uncle coughed into his napkin. My mother's smile froze, torn between correcting her own mother and not starting a fight during dessert. Emily leaned into the attention, like she'd been waiting all evening. "Don't worry, Grandma," she said sweetly. "Not everyone's meant for that kind of responsibility." Heat climbed up my neck. I could feel my father watching me, waiting to see if I'd finally snap. Instead, I did the one thing none of them expected. I smiled. Not the brittle, pasted-on smile I'd worn at 100 family gatherings, but a small, genuine curve of my mouth that came from somewhere much colder and clearer. Because what Grandma didn't know, what Emily didn't know, what no one at that table knew, was that by the time they'd clinked their glasses to her new mortgage, I already owned more roofs than Emily ever would. And one of them, if things kept going the way they were, might soon be hers. If you've ever been the person everyone underestimates at the Christmas table, the one they compare, pity, or prod with questions about when you'll catch up, you know, that strange mix of shame and rage that bubbles just beneath your ribs. You also know the dangerous power of staying quiet when you could start a war. So before I tell you how that one toast at Grandma June's house turned into a foreclosure, a bidding war, and a set of keys no one expected to land in my hand, let me know in the comments if you've ever sat through a holiday meal being measured against someone else's timeline. Where are you watching from? What did you wish you could have said? Because that night, while my sister basked in applause and my grandmother demanded to know when I'd stop throwing my money away on rent, I just passed the mashed potatoes and let them talk. I knew something they didn't. I wasn't wasting my money. I was aiming it. And the target they'd picked, Emily's shiny new house, was more fragile than any of them realized. My name is Nora Bennett, and in my family, I've always been the practical one. That sounds like a compliment until you realize it's usually code for the one we don't have to worry about or include. Growing up in a small Oregon town, our family mythology was built around my grandmother, June, and her house. She'd bought it with my grandfather in 1968. A modest 2-story with green shutters and a yard just big enough for a clothesline and a crooked apple tree. By the time we were kids, Grandpa was gone, but the house was legend. That roof never had a mortgage after 1985. She liked to say, patting the dining room wall, "Your grandfather and I knew how to live within our means." To her, a paid-off house was proof of character, not just math. She'd remind us of it every time a cousin leased a car or my dad hinted about upgrading their kitchen. "Debt is a chain," she'd say. "A house is the only chain worth wearing." My parents absorbed that gospel. My mother, Lori, worked as a receptionist at a dental office. My father, Tom, managed inventory at a warehouse. They weren't poor, exactly, but we hovered close enough to the edge that every decision, felt like it might tip us. When I was 16 and Emily was 13, Dad sat us down for the talk about college. We can help some, he'd said, fingers laced together, but not everything. Scholarships, jobs, that'll be on you. I listened, made notes, and built a plan. Community college first, then a transfer scholarship to a state university where I majored in data science and minored in economics. By 23, I'd landed an analyst job in Portland tracking housing trends for a mid-size firm. Emily, on the other hand, floated. She was the golden girl, with movie poster eyes and a laugh that drew people in from across a room. Teachers excused her missed assignments. Relatives cooed over her creative spirit when she changed majors 3 times and eventually dropped out. Grandma June adored her. "My little homemaker," she'd say, smoothing Emily's hair. "You just need the right man and a sweet little nest." To me, she'd say, "I suppose you'll keep chasing those numbers in the city. Just don't forget, you can't hug a spreadsheet." I learned to smile and let it roll off. Spreadsheets, at least, never judged me for not wanting kids. The thing about watching housing data every day, though, is that eventually you start to see the world in mortgage ratios and zoning maps. I saw how much interest my parents paid on their 30-year loan, how one surprise repair could wipe out a year of savings. I watched neighborhoods gentrify and implode. I watched people lose homes they'd poured their souls into because one job loss or illness pushed them over the edge. And I learned something important. A house isn't automatically safety. Sometimes it's just a very pretty anchor. At 27, I inherited my first property, but not from Grandma. Great Aunt Ruth, my grandmother's older sister, was everything June wasn't. Quiet, observant, and allergic to drama. She'd never married. She'd bought a tiny duplex on the edge of town when she was 30 and spent the next 5 decades paying it off and quietly living on the rental income. No kids, no grandkids, just a handful of nieces and nephews. She used to invite me over when I was home from college, making tea and asking about my coursework. "You understand numbers," she'd say. "Your grandmother understands nostalgia. Those are not the same thing." When she died, the will left small bequests to everyone, and the duplex to me. "It's not much," Mom had said when we read it, relief and worry fighting in her eyes. "Roof sold. Tenants can be a hassle. You don't have to keep it. Honey, you can always sell." Grandma had sniffed. Ruth always did have odd ideas about who deserved what. I drove out to the duplex alone the next weekend. It sat on a scruffy corner lot, 2 modest units, chipped paint, overgrown roses along the fence. The tenants paid on time. The numbers, when I ran them, weren't glamorous, but they were solid. So I did something no one expected. I kept it. I fixed the roof. I painted the siding. I refinanced at a lower rate and tucked the leftover equity into a reserve account. Then, slowly, I bought another small place with a friend from work. And another. By the time I turned 32, I owned, through a little LLC called Quiet Harbor Properties, for small rentals with decent cash flow. Nothing luxurious, just steady, boring houses that made boring, beautiful money. My family knew almost none of this. They knew I played with data and did something in real estate. They assumed I was just an overpaid renter with no real responsibilities. So when Emily called one wet October evening, breathless, I took the phone between chopping onions and glanced at the duplex rent deposits blinking on my banking app. "You're not going to believe this," she squealed. "We got approved." "For what?" I asked, though I already knew. 4 months. Her Instagram had been a stream of house hunting selfies and manifesting my dream home mood boards. "The house," she said. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, big yard, white kitchen, the works. We close in December. I leaned against the counter. "Congratulations." That was fast. I thought you were still paying off your credit cards." She laughed it off. "Oh, it all worked out. Evan got a raise, and Grandma helped with the down payment. You worry too much, Nora. Grandma helped." I stirred the onions until they hissed, mind spinning. "How much did she give you?" I asked carefully. "Oh, I don't know, like, enough," Emily said. She said her savings were just sitting there. Better to see her money go to something real while she's alive, not wait till we're fighting over an inheritance. Anyway, you're not into houses, right? All that mobility stuff you talk about. That mobility stuff was called diversification, but I let it slide. Did she co-sign? I asked. Emily hesitated just long enough for me to know the answer before she said, "Sort of. She and Dad went to the bank with us. It was all very official. Don't freak out. The mortgage guy said Grandma's house is plenty of collateral." My hand tightened on the spoon. "Collateral? Emily," I said, throat tight, "are you telling me they took a lien on Grandma's house as security for your loan?" "God, you make everything sound so dramatic," she groaned. "They put her down as a co-borrower. It's normal. Everyone does it. Honestly, why can't you be happy for me instead of turning it into a spreadsheet problem?" My vision tunneled for a second. I'd spent years looking at worst-case scenarios. One job loss, one medical bill, and suddenly banks that had been your best friends turned into wolves. If you default, they can come after Grandma's house, right? I said quietly, "It's not just your problem. It's hers." She huffed. "We're not going to default. Evan's got stable work. My Etsy shop is picking up. Rates are low. This is our chance." As she chattered about backsplash tiles and nursery paint colors, I hadn't even realized they were trying for a baby yet. I stared at the rain streaking down my apartment window and felt a cold knot form in my stomach. It wasn't just that Emily was playing with fire. It was that my grandmother had handed her the matches. At Thanksgiving, Grandma couldn't stop bragging. We leveraged the equity, she told anyone who would listen, as if she'd just invented finance. Why let it sit there? The bank said it was a very savvy move. I tried once to pull her aside, to explain that at 78, taking on a new mortgage to help a couple already living paycheck to paycheck might not be the savvy the cheerful loan officer had in mind. She patted my hand. "You've always been so anxious, Nora," she said. "Worry, worry, worry. Emily and Evan are building a future. You're just renting one. I'm not afraid of taking a little risk for my family." For my family. The implication hung there. Some of us were family worth risking the house for. Others were the safety net. So I did what I've always done. I smiled. Then I went home, opened my laptop, and started downloading public records. The deed on Grandma's house now had a shiny new deed of trust attached, her and Emily and Evan listed as co-borrowers. The loan amount made my stomach flip. If Emily's raise vanished or their expenses jumped, there was almost no cushion. I dug deeper. Adjustable rate mortgage. Low introductory payment. Ballooning in 5 years. I closed my eyes. They'd strapped Grandma's paid-off house to a ticking bomb. I ran the numbers 16 different ways, searching for an angle where this worked out without drama. There wasn't one. Something was going to break. The only variable was who would be crushed when it did. By the time that Christmas dinner toast rolled around, Grandma crowing about finally having a homeowner in the family, I already had the foreclosure timelines for our county memorized. What I didn't yet have was a plan. That would come later, when the late notices started to arrive. The first crack showed up in April, in the form of a text from my mother. "You have a minute to talk? It's about Emily. Please call." I called during my lunch break, standing by the office window overlooking a parking lot sprouting dandelions through the asphalt. Mom's voice was thin. "Your sister's just under a lot of pressure right now." I'd learned that under pressure was our family's code for we've made a series of avoidable financial choices, and now everything is on fire. What happened? I asked. Well, the roof needed work sooner than they thought, she said, and the car broke down. And there was that emergency room visit when Evan sprained his back. Insurance didn't cover all of it. The credit cards, you know how interest is. I did know. And the mortgage? I asked. A pause. They were only a couple of weeks late, she rushed to say. It's sorted now. Your grandmother helped with a little more from her savings. How much more? Just some. She doesn't like to burden you with details. Translation. A lot. Mom, I said slowly, if they keep doing this, there's not going to be any retirement for Grandma. Or a house. She sighed. You always think the worst, Nora. It'll calm down. Once Emily's Etsy shop really takes off, they'll be fine. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Can I see the mortgage statement? The exact numbers. Oh, honey, that's their private business, she said. Your sister would feel judged. I wanted to scream that judgment was coming whether we invited it or not, in the form of late fees and nastier letters. Instead, I opened the county's online records again that night. That's when I saw the notice of default, filed 3 weeks earlier. Public record. They were already 60 days behind. My phone chimed with a notification from our Quiet Harbor Properties account. Rent deposited on time from all 4 units. For a few seconds, my life split in 2 versions. In one, I stayed in my lane. I let Emily and Evan handle their own choices. If Grandma lost her house along the way, we'd call it fate and shake our heads. In the other, I stepped in, not as the anxious older sister who preached caution, but as something I'd quietly become over the last 5 years. An investor who knew exactly what banks did with shaky loans. I chose the second version. Are you sure you want to wade into this? My business partner, Liam, asked when I sketched the situation on a napkin over coffee. He was 10 years older than me, a former contractor who'd burned out on flipping houses and now preferred the slow, sane grind of buy and hold rentals. If they implode, Grandma loses her house, I said. And yeah, Emily mocked me for renting, but that doesn't mean I want to watch her get crushed either. Family deals get messy, he warned. They're already messy, I replied. I just want some say in where the mess lands. He tapped his pen against the napkin. Okay, then we don't go in as family. We go in as Quiet Harbor. Business only. The bank doesn't care about your history. They care about risk. Banks, I knew, hated holding on to non-performing loans. They'd rather offload the headache to someone else and write off the loss. Some community banks will let an investor buy the note at a discount. Liam said, you pay them, say, 80 cents on the dollar, they hand you the mortgage. You become the new lender. Then you decide whether you work with the borrowers or foreclose. The idea sat between us like a live wire. Is that allowed? I asked. He shrugged. Happens all the time. It's just usually faceless funds doing it, not someone who's watched the borrowers grow up. The thought of some out-of-state corporation owning the paper on Grandma's house made my skin crawl. I'd rather we be the ones in control, I said. He nodded slowly, then start by talking to the bank. Find out how bad it is. The next week, I scheduled a meeting at the local branch that held Emily's loan. The manager, a woman with a stone-still smile, wouldn't give me specifics at first. That's confidential, she said. You're not on the note. I understand, I said, sliding a card across the desk. But my company acquires distressed residential paper. Public records show you've initiated default proceedings on 1248 Cedar Lane. Emily's address. I kept my voice even. We're interested in discussing a possible purchase of the note. Her eyebrows inched up when she saw the LLC letterhead and the list of properties we already owned. In banking, boring competence opens doors. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. Off the record, they're 3 months behind. We've given them multiple chances. If they don't bring it current within 30 days, it goes to foreclosure. And the co-borrower? I asked. June Bennett. Also liable, she said, though to be frank, at her age, we'd rather avoid the optics of booting her out. But policy is policy. I swallowed hard. What would it take for you to consider assigning the note? I asked. She eyed me for a long moment. You're sure you want to mix business? And whatever this is, she asked. No one had ever summed up my entire family in one vague handwave before, but she nailed it. I'm sure, I said. She named a number, less than the remaining principal on the loan, but still high enough to make my stomach flip. Liam and I went over the math that night. If you bought the note at that price, and they did manage to catch up, you'd make a modest return in interest, he said. If they can't, you could either negotiate a deed in lieu, have them sign the house over voluntarily, or foreclose and take it to auction. I don't want Grandma homeless, I said. Then make that a condition of any deal, he said. Release her from the note once we take over. You can do that as the new lender. The bank would never, but you're not the bank. The pieces clicked into place. I'd been raised to think power lived in people like my grandmother, loud, decisive, convinced they knew best. But real power, I was discovering, lived in whoever wrote the terms. 2 days later, the bank agreed, in principle, to assign the note to Quiet Harbor if we could wire the funds within 2 weeks, which meant one more step, telling my family. I chose another table for that conversation, this time at my parents' kitchen, not Grandma's. Mom wrung her hands as I laid out what I'd learned. Dad frowned deeper. With each document, you went to the bank, he asked finally, as if that were the most shocking part. They already filed the default notice. I said, this isn't a secret. Anyone with internet can see it. Emily and Evan came in halfway through, faces flushed from the cold. What's this about you snooping on our loan? Emily demanded, ripping off her scarf. Sit down, I said calmly. Please. They didn't, but they stopped moving. I explained the foreclosure timeline, the bank's willingness to sell the note, the risk to Grandma's house. Evan blew out a sharp breath. We're getting back on track, he said. I've picked up extra shifts. We don't need you playing hero. You're 90 days behind, I said. The bank disagrees. Emily folded her arms. Of course you went straight to a spreadsheet solution. Did it ever occur to you to just have faith? Faith doesn't impress collections departments, I said. Numbers do. Grandma, who'd been quiet in the corner armchair, finally spoke. I told them the bank would be reasonable, she said, more to herself than anyone. They know our family. They know we're good people. Banks know payments, I said softly. That's it. She looked at me with something like betrayal. You think I made a mistake? I thought about all the times she dismissed my choices as temporary phases. All the times she'd said, you'll understand once you have a real home. I think you took a risk you didn't fully understand. I said, so did they. It's done. Now we deal with it. Dad rubbed a hand over his face. So what are you proposing? He asked. We pass a hat and pay the arrears. They'd still be underwater, I said, and the rate resets in a couple of years. This isn't a one-time patch. So what then? Emily snapped. We sell, lose everything, move into some tiny box like you. Her words stung more than I wanted them to. You have more house than you can afford. I said, that's not success. That's just bigger trouble. Evan snorted. Easy for you to say, when you don't believe in owning anything. I let the jab pass. I'm buying your loan, I said, through my company. The room went very still. What? Mom whispered. I explained. Again, this time in plain English, the note purchase, the discount, The fact that instead of owing the bank, they'd owe Quiet Harbor. So you'd be our new bank? Evan said slowly. In a sense, I said, but with one major difference. I'm willing to release Grandma from liability as part of the deal. Her house would be safe. If you defaulted again, it would be between you and me, not you and a faceless institution that sees her as a line item. Emily's eyes flashed. So you swoop in, save Grandma, and we spend the rest of our lives paying you? That's predatory. Not if we restructure the terms together, I said. Lower payment, longer term. But we'd also have clear agreements. No more help from savings every time something breaks. You either make the payment or we talk about alternatives, including you moving and letting me take over the house as an investment property. So that's what you want, she said, voice shaking. You want my house. I want Grandma not to lose hers. I said, and I want you to live somewhere you can sustain. If that's this house under saner terms, great. If it's not, then we adjust. Grandma's gaze darted between us. This is a lot, she said faintly. It is, I agreed, which is why I need everyone to think about it. But the bank's clock is ticking. We have 12 days to make this work before they send it to auction. No one volunteered to toast this time. The next week was a blur of spreadsheets, late-night arguments, and slammed doors. Evan flip-flopped between grudging interest and wounded pride. Emily alternated between accusing me of trying to steal her dream and begging me not to let strangers take our home. Grandma sat at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that went cold, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. On day 10, the bank sent a final notice. Pay in full or foreclosure proceedings would accelerate. On day 11, Evan showed up at my apartment building, eyes red. Fine, he said without preamble. Do it. Buy the stupid loan. Just don't evict us right away. I nodded. Then you and Emily both need to sign the restructuring agreement. And Grandma signs to release her from the note. Once the bank assigns it to Quiet Harbor, we'll execute our terms. On day 13, I wired the money. Quiet Harbor Properties became, officially, the new holder of the Bennett Evans mortgage. I didn't sleep that night. It's one thing to run numbers abstractly. It's another to stake a huge chunk of your net worth on the idea that you can both protect your grandmother and not drown your sister. The signing happened at Grandma's dining table, the same one where she toasted to Emily's adulthood. This time there were no Christmas decorations, just a stack of legal documents, a notary, and the low murmur of explanation. Grandma's hand shook as she signed the release. So after this, she clarified, if they don't pay, they lose the new house, but not mine. That's right, I said. Your house is no longer collateral. She exhaled shakily. I never meant to gamble with this place, she whispered. I just wanted to help. I know, I said. We're fixing it. Emily signed the new note, jaw tight. Evan added his signature without meeting my eyes. When the notary stamped the last page and left, the silence that settled in the room felt different than at Christmas. Heavier, more honest. You really own our mortgage now? Emily asked finally. Yes, I said. Quiet Harbor does. My company. She looked around as if expecting cameras to appear, as if this might be an elaborate prank. You act like you're some big landlord, she scoffed weakly. I thought you just crunched numbers. I do both, I said. I've been doing both for years. Grandma stared at me. You own other houses? She asked, bewildered. 4 little rentals and a duplex from Aunt Ruth. I said, nothing fancy. Just enough to make sure I'm not one crisis away from begging a bank for mercy. No one mocked me for renting then. They were too busy realizing who exactly they'd been underestimating. For a while, it worked. With the new terms I drafted, Lower monthly payment, extended timeline, strict cap on additional borrowing. Emily and Evan managed to stay current. Grandma slept better, knowing her own roof wasn't on the line every time a pipe burst across town. We treated each other like we were both lender and family, which is to say, awkwardly, at birthdays and barbecues. Emily still found ways to slip in comments about my house and being a real adult, but there was a new hesitation behind them, as if she wasn't quite sure where bragging ended and hypocrisy began. I let most of it go. Quiet revenge doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it's just sending a monthly statement with your company's name at the top and watching people remember over and over who signed what. Then, 18 months later, the interest rate ticked up. We planned for it. The increase wasn't catastrophic, but life doesn't respect amortization schedules. Evan's company downsized. His steady job became a half-time contract. Emily's side hustles fluctuated. Daycare costs for their new baby ate the margin we'd engineered. Late fees started nibbling at the edges. They missed one payment, then another. By the second month, I sat them down at the same dining table, now strewn with burp cloths and baby toys. "I'm not the bank," I said, "but I also can't let this slide indefinitely. The agreement we all signed is clear." Evan rubbed his tired eyes. "Can't you just roll it into the principal or something?" he asked. "You know we're good for it long term." "I know you had good intentions," I said gently, "but right now you're paying for a house this size, daycare, 2 cars, and consumer debt on top. There's no buffer. This isn't about willpower. It's about math." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "So what are you saying? That you're going to kick us out? Your own niece?" The baby gurgled in a swing nearby, oblivious. "I'm saying we need to talk about options," I said. "One of them is selling." Her head snapped up. "No, absolutely not. This house is our dream." "It's a dream that's drowning you," I said, "and it's dragging me and potentially Grandma if things spiral down with it. If we sell now, while values are still up, you could walk away with a little equity, rent somewhere more affordable, reset. And you keep the difference," she shot back. "How convenient." "We split any net proceeds after costs," I said evenly. "All of this is in the contract. You read it." She glared. "I skimmed it. That's half the problem," I said softly. The argument looped in circles. Pride, fear, entitlement, love, all tangled. In the end, they refused to list. "I'm not handing over my hard-earned home to you," Emily said, voice trembling. "I don't care what papers we signed." So the late notices kept coming. As holder of the note, I had 2 routes: pursue foreclosure or sit back and let arrears pile up until everyone drowned. I chose a third path. At the next missed payment, I initiated what the agreement called for, a deed in lieu of foreclosure. In plain language, that meant giving them one last choice: voluntarily transfer the house's title to Quiet Harbor in exchange for wiping out their debt, and letting them walk away without a foreclosure on their record. "You'd really do this?" Mom asked when she heard. "Force them to give up the house." "I'm not forcing anything," I said. "I'm offering them a way out that's kinder than what a bank would do. If I were a stranger, the sheriff would already be posting auction notices." Grandma sat at her kitchen table, staring at the paperwork. "I never imagined it would come to this," she whispered. "Neither did I said. "But we wrote these contingencies for a reason." It took another month of tense calls, tearful conversations, and one very blunt meeting with a financial counselor I insisted they see before Emily and Evan finally signed. Maybe it was the counselor explaining, in neutral terms, how their debt-to-income ratio was unsustainable. Maybe it was holding their crying baby, while they imagined explaining, 10 years from now, why their credit was wrecked. Whatever tipped them, they signed. Quiet Harbor Properties became, officially, the owner of 1248 Cedar Lane. The day we recorded the deed, I stood alone in the echoing foyer of what had once been my sister's dream home. Sunlight streamed through the big front window, glinting off the hardwood. The air still smelled faintly of Emily's vanilla candles. This wasn't how I'd fantasized about getting ahead. I hadn't dreamed of owning my sister's former living room. But as I walked through each room, checking for damage after they'd moved out, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, relief. Grandma's house was safe. The chain of bad decisions had been cut before it reached her front door. I turned the house into a rental, priced modestly. A young couple with more realistic expectations signed a lease within weeks. The numbers penciled out. It wasn't a windfall, but it was a solid addition to the portfolio. At the next Christmas, we didn't gather at Grandma's. She'd decided the stairs were too much and had moved into a small, accessible apartment in a senior community where someone else handled the shoveling. Instead, we met at my parents' place. The tree was slightly lopsided. The food was simpler. The tension was different. Emily and Evan arrived late from their new townhouse, smaller, closer to the city, with rent they could actually afford. She looked tired but softer, the sharp edges dulled. I'd given them first option to rent 1248 Cedar Lane at a discounted rate, but they declined. I need a fresh start, Emily had said, voice thick. I can't walk past that front door every day and not think about all of this. I respected that. After dinner, as everyone moved toward the living room, Grandma tugged my sleeve. Walk with me, she said. We stood on the back porch, watching our breath puff in the cold. I'd been thinking about last Christmas, she said without preamble, about what I said to you. I stared at the neighbor's fence. It's fine, Grandma. It's not, she said. I mocked you. I held Emily up like a trophy and made you feel small because you didn't fit my picture. And all the while, you were the one quietly keeping all of us from sinking. That's not exactly. It is, she insisted. If you hadn't seen what was happening, if you hadn't stepped in, even when we scolded you for overreacting, I'd have lost my house. Emily would have had a foreclosure. The baby would have grown up hearing stories about the big, beautiful disaster his parents made. She took my hand, her fingers papery but strong. I'm sorry, she said simply, for every time I measured you by someone else's yardstick. The apology hit harder than any insult she'd ever thrown. I swallowed. You were trying to help Emily. I said, I get it. I was trying to hold on to a world that doesn't exist anymore, she corrected, where one job lasted 40 years and a paid-off house meant you were set. You saw the new world. I didn't trust that. That's on me. We stood there a while, listening to muffled laughter from inside. Finally, she said, I'd like to change my will. I blinked. Grandma? Not to punish anyone, she said. To reflect reality. Emily will be fine. She has you as an example now, whether she admits it or not. But you're the one who understands what these assets really are. What did you have in mind? I asked cautiously. Well, she said, a sly glint returning to her eyes. I thought about leaving this house equally to both of you, but then I remembered I already made that mistake with my equity. We both laughed softly. What if, she continued, I leave you the house with the condition that Emily gets a share of the rental income for a set number of years, enough to help without enabling. You'd manage it. She'd benefit, and no bank could ever use it as collateral again. I pictured the little house I'd grown up visiting, the apple tree, the kitchen that smelled like cinnamon and pine sol. I pictured tenants, maybe a young family like ours had been, making memories there while the income helped my sister's family stabilize further. It's your house, I said. I'll honor whatever you decide. She squeezed my hand. I know you will. That's why I'm comfortable deciding this with you, not around you. Later that night, as people bundled up to leave, Emily sidled over. We drove past 1248 last week. She said quietly, "Yeah." I asked. "They put up lights on the porch," she said. "It looked happy." I nodded. The new tenants seemed like good people. She twisted her hands. "I hated you," she admitted, "for a while. For taking it. For not just fixing it behind the scenes and letting me keep pretending." "I know," I said, "but the counselor you made us see," she said something that stuck. Emily glanced at me, eyes shiny. She said, "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone drowning is to take away the heavy backpack they refuse to admit is dragging them under, even if they scream at you while you're unbuckling it." I huffed a laugh. That sounds like her. "She also said you probably saved our marriage," Emily added. "I don't know about that, but I know we fight less now that we're not constantly broke and terrified." She took a breath. "So," she said, "thank you. I'm not there yet where I'm happy about everything. But I'm grateful we're not homeless. And I'm grateful you didn't let your big sister ego write us off." "I'm the older one," I corrected automatically. She rolled her eyes. "You know what I mean." We hugged, awkward at first, then real, as I drove home that night to my still-rented apartment, a place I chose strategically near my properties and my office. I thought about that first Christmas toast. My grandmother had measured my life in square footage and marital status. It had stung because part of me still believed that was the only rubric that counted. But standing in bank offices and conference rooms, drafting contracts and signing deeds, I'd learned another truth. Settling down isn't about a house or a ring. It's about settling into who you really are and refusing to downplay it just because it doesn't look impressive on a holiday card. I'd settled into being the one who read the fine print, the one who saw beyond the granite countertops to the loan terms underneath, the one who was willing to be called controlling, anxious, even cruel, if it meant the people I loved didn't get fed into systems that saw them as nothing but numbers. If you've ever been mocked for not having the traditional markers of success, no house, no spouse, no kids, remember this. A quiet plan can be more powerful than the loudest brag. The house they praise today might be gone tomorrow, but the skills you build, the boundaries you set, the boring, unglamorous decisions you make in the background, those are the things that keep roofs over heads when the music stops. So when someone at your next holiday dinner asks, "When will you settle down?" maybe you'll do what I did. Just smile. Because you'll know something they don't. You already have.